Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am Gabo the Shaman, and today we are discussing, today I wanted to talk about some things that were, just on my mind and stuff, about health and healing and, honestly, like why people get old, they get sick, and they die. Right? This has been the reality for for humanity for all time. Like there like to my knowledge, there hasn't been anybody that I've personally known who has defied death or lived longer than 100 or so years, right? These just these things just naturally don't exist. Um, I think that's partially due to just the human body. The human body wasn't made to like live for thousands or even multiple hundreds of years. But um so there is something called um immortals. So they're called the perfected immortals. Now, this comes from the original sect of Taoism called Maoshan. Now, the Maoshan monks, the whole idea of Taoism is these people were not seeking ascension, they were not seeking spiritual mastery. They were seeking that they could live in this body that they had, their physical human body, for forever, for eternity, because they wanted to their whole point was um to master living in this body, like to master reality, to get the universe to change and to be shaped into what the um so these guys would do magic. They were even called also they were called um they're basically spirit fighters, basically. So what that means is that they would actually fight demons with their bare hands using the electromagnetic energy of their heart center and stimulating meridians and things like this. This is how they would do that. So, whenever, like, so you'd have, you know, uh, you'd have the Maoshans on one mountain, but then on the next mountain over, you would have, and this is in, like, I think southern China or something like that, around there. Um, and so on the next mountaintop, you'd have some other sect of Taoists. You'd have um, Wudang Shan or whatever, different sects of Taoism. So you have the Mao Shan go to the Wudang Shan temple and they would say, "Hey, Mao Shan guys, we have a bunch of demons running around here." And so the Mao Shan guys would go to that temple. They would be invited there, they'd be called there, and they would be paid for their services for removing the demons, right? And these guys were so powerful and so, just so, had so much power and control over demons that they could just slice them to pieces with their energy. And then there would be this healing presence, this peace that comes upon the temple, right? And, since the average Taoist monk could not do this, could not accomplish this feat, in fact, they were terrified of the demons. They couldn't fight them, right? So that's why they called these guys in. So now they they get jealous and they get, when you're afraid of something, you want to protect yourself against it, right? Even though these guys were helping them out. So they called the Maoshan guys. They said that they were evil. They said that they were controlled by demons. They said that they were, nasty and dangerous and all this stuff. Whereas, those guys, it was the power of their heart and soul and the feminine energy that surrounds the soul that was actually blasting away the negativity, the evil. But in a world that's not connected to the soul, that's not connected to the heart, that power becomes frightening. And, people think, oh, he's evil or whatever. And so, um, this is what I wanted to talk about, because even though, like, they were, they were being talked a bunch of crap about, um, these Maoshan guys were actually the high priest, or the highest monk with the most experience and authority and all that. um was actually, what they would do is, when they had meditated, when they had, um you know achieved a form of spiritual mastery, or mastery over the body, and, you know did their qigong work, because that's what they were doing, is basically qigong, and neigong, um these spiritual practices, these, not necessarily, I mean, it's spiritual practice, but it's also just like a energetic form of martial art. That's what the the Maoshan taught and did. And so when they would achieve a certain mastery over the energy, and they would just achieve a certain mastery over the meditations, there's certain meditations that they would do, and certain mudras and certain things that they would do and practice to get their body up to a certain level of energetic state, to where they could then, like, the high priests would go ahead and they would, be, I forget, I think it's, yeah, they would be buried in, like, these coffins, and then they would have, like, a straw to breathe through, right? Like, they would have air coming into the coffin, basically, through, like, bamboo shoot that went up to the surface. And so, every, whatever it was, 90 days, so they would put this very much alive person into this, like, coffin, and bury them, and then 90 days later, or whatever, they would come back to the spot where they buried him, dig him up, and look inside the coffin, see if they were okay, see, dust off the. I think that was in caves now that I'm thinking about it. So they had these caves that they would go into, underground like caves where the priest would, lay on a rock and just meditate. And then, every so often, every week or so, just not that often, but often enough, where they would, come in and they would, you know, wipe the dust off of them and make sure they were okay, you know. And then over a period of time, they would they were only checking on them like every week or so. And then like maybe after a few months, they would come check on the body. The previous week he was there, he was fine, he was there laying down in meditation and all that. And then now, poof, he's gone. Literally, you had people disappearing. Their bodies would no longer be there. And the only thing that they found was hair, fingernails, clothes, laid out like the person was there, Um, so they had, all these signs that, the human body was taken. Like they'd even find like dead skin cells and stuff on the rock and stuff. And that high priest had evolved into such a level that he would just poof, gone. And it wasn't like he was playing like a magic trick. Oh yeah, I'll fool you, you know. But then when the disciples, when the monks would all see that he was no longer there, a few days later he would appear to them like as a stranger, or like there's different ways that they would manifest themselves to other people. And these people who did this, who would the like there's like their body didn't die, they just transformed into another state, that like an energetic state, a spiritual state, whatever. Heck, I don't even know. I mean, I don't think, yeah, I don't think I could do that. you know. So yeah. Um, but that's what I wanted to talk about today, because it's just like, how do you do that? And what sets the Maoshan monks apart from the rest of us? I mean, I think there's many things, but I'm trying to get people to understand that. So let's talk about the energy practices. So in the, when these were first being created, these energy practices, qigong, neigong, these specific Maoshan practices, these specific forms and sets, it wasn't like the Grand Master just decided, oh yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. We're going to teach it this specific way because of just random reasons. You know. No, it wasn't random. Like I know a lot of people think that qigong is just, you know, BS, just moving your body in, in certain ways just to generate like a feeling of the energy moving through, a lot of that. So, yeah, there's a lot of like skepticism there from a lot of people. But what it really does is the Chinese had to invent a system that, a system that would heal people, that would actually help people and heal people because they didn't have modern medicine. They didn't have like what we have today, doctors who can, you know, uh, give you drugs in order to alleviate symptoms, right? So there was none of that. They were living in very primitive times, and they relied more on, you know, uh, spiritually gifted people to heal the population than they did on doctors who would be trained in medical school. So what they did is they created, Chinese traditional medicine, TCM, right? So in TCM, you have something called meridians, right? These are energetic pathways that travel through your body, right? Through your head, torso, legs, arms, and there's points on the hands. Like there's points all over your body. Like certain pathways correlate to certain things. And I have every reason to believe that this energy, that this information about the human body, it wasn't just, oh yeah, let me put a line here, a line there down your arm. It wasn't just random. Because if it wasn't random, nobody would use it, right? It's just, okay, well, I could get the same amount of healing by just resting than I can by you sticking needles into my arm, right? Or into my head or torso. So, if it's arbitrary, if it's useless, if it's just completely random, made up garbage, then, why were the Chinese people using this for so long? Because it's not random. It's not, it's not garbage. It's actually something that was downloaded from somebody. So something that was spiritually intuited, spiritually intuited from higher sources. Okay? So so from TCM and from Qigong and all these energetic practices that were created by different cultures, we have Qigong, we have TCM, we have yoga, we have Kundalini yoga, um we have meditation, different forms of meditation, um breath work, things like this. So all of that was, was intuited. And these different cultures started using these things not only for spiritual transformation, but also for physical healing, psychological healing, emotional healing, things like this. Because I know that in our society today, doctors and whatever, there's a huge focus on physical things, physical symptoms. Whereas in other cultures, they would look at you as a whole being, and maybe something over here caused something over there, or maybe this is related to that, or because you're not just you know a you're not just one thing. You're not just your physical body. You are multiple things. I mean, you have a causal body, an energetic body, an astral body. You have, the what is it called? The Maya koshas. I think that's what it's called. The energy sheaths. So, all this stuff, it's all there in your body. And so what I want to say is, people, if you want to heal, you go to the doctor. You get medicine, right? You get medicine because you have a runny nose. Why do you have a runny nose? Well, I don't care. I have a runny nose, god damn it. It's like so we're so focused on treating the symptoms that we're not interested in what caused it, or how you can, turn that, how you can manipulate causal factor, right? So, I mean, come on. So, I hope I've made my point clear that we're more than just physical beings, right? We're more than just physical beings. We are energetic beings. We are emotional beings. We have psychological beings. We have a kundalini running up and down our spine. We have, yoga and, mantra and tantra. These things work for our physical and spiritual health and well-being. So, okay, so let's get into like why people get sick. Now, I just told you that we are more than just this physical body, right? And we also have emotions. We have emotional needs, we have psychological needs, we have just different needs that we need met, right? We can't just, a human being who is isolated, right? They're not going to be able to survive. Like, for example, that's why they have limitations on, solitary in prison, in isolation in prison. They have limitations. They need that 23 and 1, 23 hours in your cell, 1 hour in the yard or exercising or something. Because if you just have that 24 hours, 24/7 in your cell, isolated, you're going to go crazy. Right? And you can't keep someone isolated like that for long, otherwise they are going to, basically we need other things. We need social, we need to talk to people. We need to do things that are healthy for us. So that goes beyond just the 3 square meals a day and you're fine, right? So that brings me to the point that, you know, there are energetic needs. So you need to walk, you need to exercise, you need to do things, right? um, in order to be a healthy human being. So, all right, so most people, the majority understanding, especially in the West, is that people have, people have uh, emotional issues or psychological issues because something's wrong physically in the brain. In fact, this is what led people to do lobotomies. They're trying to scramble the brains of their patients in order to make their feelings go away. Their negative feelings go away, right? Like they would do lobotomies for, people who are causing problems or whatever. And it didn't fix anything. It just made people worse, It's just like you can't fix a emotional issue by scrambling somebody's brain. That just doesn't work. So, um, you know, or nowadays it's taking pills. You take a pill to, and the reason, like, if you ask somebody, hey, why do you take that, SSRI antidepressant? And they'll say, well, I'm depressed. I have all these feelings that are running me, And so the thing there is, just I don't I think it's been proven over time that SSRIs and pills, antidepressants don't work. And I wonder why that is. Because it's not about the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. It's not about these serotonin levels. It's about something deeper. And as scientists have found out, there are neurons in the heart center, and there are neurons in the intestines or the gut area, intestinal energy area. So, it's like, what is this for? Why do we have neurons in these places? Well, oddly enough, Taoism has shown us that we have 3 main energy centers. These are called the 3 ones. So you have, your third eye, you have your brain, your third eye, you have your heart, and you have your lower self in the navel center, the lower dantian. So these are called the dantians. And sure enough, science has backed this up. That, yep, you have neurons in your intestines, you have neurons in your heart, And so it's not about the mind, it's not about fixing the brain. In fact, somebody did a study with patients who had a severed, what is it called? It's like that area, you know how you have the two halves of the brain, and then you have this bundle of nerves that's connecting the two halves. So somebody naturally had that, like, severed or cut when they were a kid, like, not on purpose. It's somebody who was born with that deformity where they didn't have the two halves of their brain communicating with each other. That bundle of nerves was separated, didn't come together. And so they tried this with a few people. They said, "Hey, I'm gonna," so they basically whispered into their right ear, "Hey, I want you to go ahead and get up and go sit in that chair over there on the other side of the room." So he'd get up, patient would get up, walk across the room, sit down over there, right? So then they would ask him in his left ear, "Hey, why did you do that? Why did you just get up and you walked across the room and you came and sat over here?" "Oh, because it's cold over there. It's cold on the other side of the room." You just totally made that up because he heard something on one side, and then the brain was trying to figure out why he did that. And so he just poof made stuff up. Okay, so this is a sign like that, and this happened with multiple patients. So this is about that the brain will just the brain is not, it's like a recorder. It's not in charge. It doesn't have an executive function. The soul has the executive function. The heart center has the executive function. So the heart center tells the brain what to do. The brain then sends like cooperates with the unconscious in the navel center. The unconscious is like responding with the heart. So there's this communication between the three selves. But the brain is just recording this stuff. So, for example, they they hooked up a patient in this one example to like a MRI, or no, it was like a ECG or something, where they would stick electrodes on the brain and they would monitor any kind of brain activity. And they would say, because they wanted to see how fast the brain would, you know, you basically you tell somebody something, and then the brain receives that message, and then the brain, you know, it basically tells the body to do that thing. So, for example, somebody had lip balm, right? Somebody had lip balm in front of them, and the nurse said, "Hey, I want you to pick up that lip balm." Okay, so the guy does it. He does that. And then what they found was he heard the message and then he did it, and then it like heard the message, he did that, and then the brain activity picked up. So it was he already took the action upon what was being told without the brain activity going. So the brain, it actually turns out in like modern research is kind of proving this, which is the brain is a recorder. The brain records information. So yeah, you know, of course, use your ears to listen and understand and comprehend, but there's something deeper going on. It's not the brain making the executive function decisions, it's the heart. I believe it's the heart. Now, like, I could be proven wrong on that, but yeah. I'm open to be proven wrong on anything. Alright, so how do people get old and get sick? This is probably my favorite part of the discussion because I can relate so much to this. So, as you may know, I was born with a birth defect called optic nerve hypoplasia. So, both of my eyes are affected, but my right eye can see better than my left eye, right? And so, being born with this, I was always trying to figure out how to heal, how to get rid of this condition. And conventional science says that if you are born with this condition, you're pretty much screwed, right? There's no fixing it. There's no fixing a severed nerve or an underdeveloped nerve, right? So you're basically screwed. Well, but in I have different thoughts about that. So of course it was my oh man. So I'll tell you, um if you operate from the understanding that each of us, our souls came here for a purpose, and because they wanted to experience joy, they wanted to experience um you know life on this planet as a human with all its challenges and its difficulties and all that, right? So they wanted to experience life here as a human and all the stuff that goes along with that, right? So there was something that they were trying to accomplish by becoming human and incarnating into this body. Because the truth is, our souls, when they leave this earth, they go back to a place that's extremely peaceful and blissful and happy, and yeah, there's basically, I forget what the term is, undifferentiated something. I heard that somewhere, and it made a lot of sense. So there, you're basically in this like soup of your soul is basically goes back to its true essence, and it's this soup of like orgasmic bliss and joy and love and all those things. And so, given that, we were like, I chose to come here. Like, so, and, this is the stuff that we have to work through. So, for me, as an example, I chose to come here. I chose to be on this earth. I chose to, incarnate. And I also chose to have my disabilities, limitations, blindness, this and that, whatever it is in my life. My conditions. My some people would call this prarabdha karma. So it's like a unavoidable karma. So this is what's going on. Well, actually, in my case, it wasn't like this unavoidable karma, because I asked my light being friends, and they said no. It was totally your choice, and it was totally part of your It wasn't like a karmic thing that you did wrong. It was um like my soul's choice, basically, to incarnate like this. So, and I'm guessing that's probably because I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do the whole 9 to 5 thing. I wanted to, study and research and meditate and do all these spiritual things that I'm doing now. Right? So, so I want to talk now about, like, so we all know that why people were born with disabilities. Either it's a karmic thing or they just chose to be born with it. People get mad when I tell them you chose to come here. You chose to be born into the life that you are currently experiencing. And people get all pissed off and they say, oh, but what about the kids in India who have no food and they're just, starving and malnourished and all this stuff, or Africa or whatever. And I say, I don't know. Go ask them. Go ask them why they came here, or why they chose to come here like that. Because at the end of the day, there's some lesson to be learned. There's some strength to be gained by putting yourself in a dark, strenuous, stressful situation that it makes the soul grow. It makes the soul, like, either you expand and you grow from a situation, or you shrink and you retract. You're either in a state of growth or shriveling up and retracting. So those are your two choices. And so let's talk about, now that we got the whole birth illness out of the way, or whatever, or growing up in, like, harsh situations, or incarnated in harsh situations. So now I want to talk about what happens to a child between the ages of 0 and 3. So, what happens, and my hypothesis or theory is that this happens even in the womb. Even in the womb. Because what is the womb? Well, if you look at the What is near the womb? The lower self, the unconscious. There's neurons in the intestines, and I'm sure possibly for women there might be neurons in the uterus and all that. So yeah, you're so just think about it this way. Your baby, if you're a woman, is being born or being being like developing right inside the womb, right? So that is actually right by the lower self, the unconscious. And I think this is how generational trauma happens. So you are you find out your mother, your parent, okay, great. You feel happy and ecstatic and all this stuff. And then maybe you get a little bit fearful. Oh gosh, I didn't plan this baby. I didn't plan this pregnancy. It just happened. Okay, so and then what kind of a signal do you think that sends to a baby? Like, maybe I'm getting these unconscious signals that I'm not wanted. Maybe I get unconscious signals that I'm a burden. Maybe I get unconscious signals that my parents are mad at me. Um, it could even go from, I've seen certain situations where parents actually loathe and hate and resent their child from the moment that it's born. It's awful and it's very cruel, but sometimes this happens. You know, the thought is, oh, the baby, took away my freedom, my party time, my time to enjoy my 20s, my early life and all this stuff. So what kind of messages do you think that sends? My parents hate me. I'm unwanted. I all this stuff. And this is why generational trauma is so huge, is so prevalent. Because, the I'll just tell you this, the closest a human being will ever come to being unconditionally loved is through the love of his or her mother. The love of a mother is the closest to unconditional love. Right? So, I mean, even a father can't do that necessarily. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll see. If it's just like it's a little bit different with fathers. I mean, we're raised not to love, but to discipline, right? To the mother loves, the father disciplines, the father like shapes them and molds them and tempers them into the adult that they could become with morals and virtues and good characteristics and things like that. Like the mother loves the soul, the father shapes the man or woman, the reputation, the human being, right? To I don't know how to put it, but you guys know what I'm saying. So, we get this dynamic where, okay, maybe the baby feels like, I'm not loved, all this stuff, and that happens, and so, it's the unconscious signals that the parents send. And I know that a bunch of people were born and raised in a bunch of situations. So, it's like lower class and poverty and, middle class and rich, poor, and everything in between. People's parents had different feelings towards them. Some were extremely loving and supportive, which is awesome. Good for you, if that's the case. Some were, financially supportive, like, okay, I'll provide you your necessities and all that. But as far as emotional support, as far as emotional intelligence and emotional like vulnerability and being there to support the child emotionally, it's not there, you know. And this is because people have their own trauma and stuff like that. It's you know. So this is where personal responsibility comes in. You know, you were raised in the environment that you were raised in. You were, implanted with unconscious thoughts and patterns and characteristics and this and that. And I want you to know something. It's called unconscious for a reason. I know back in the, 2010s, it was very common for people to say, with the love and light community, the law of attraction, whatever, oh, it's your subconscious mind. They'd talk about the subconscious mind, which, okay. But the subconscious and the unconscious are two different things, and they mean two different things. The subconscious is below the conscious. The unconscious is not conscious. So, for example, an example of the subconscious would be, I don't always need to have my social security number in my head, right? Like, if I just always knew was focusing on, oh God, I gotta remember my social security, right? So I always have that in my consciousness. Well, there's time that you don't need that, right? So, when you're filling out an employment application, okay, you need that. You need to remember your phone number, your address, your social security card, how many, how old are you? all of these things, right? So that's the subconscious stuff that you need to remember, that is below the consciousness. So you don't always need to have your address in your mind, so you know it goes to to the subconscious, right? So it's there when you need it, it's not there when you don't. That's the subconscious. The unconscious, not conscious. So there might be some things, some patterns, some feelings, some characteristics that you have, some ideas, some an identity that you have that you're not consciously aware of. So, for example, you're you're with a friend, right? And somebody, and somebody comes up to you, right? Your friend comes up to you and they say, hey man, I've been noticing that you're acting very very angry. Like, is something wrong? You seem very angry. And you go, huh, whatever. I'm not angry. Shut up. Right? And so, it's just like there might be something that you're angry about that you're not conscious about. So it might be something in your unconscious that is acting that is making you feel a certain way, but it's not like conscious. So this is what we call unconscious or suppressed feelings, right? Unconscious. You're maybe unconscious about the rage towards your parents, unconscious about the sadness you feel about your spouse passing away. We all try to, trick ourselves to say, oh yeah, we're fine. But that's just the coping mechanism. That's just, the more that we acknowledge the feelings and the more that we actually, you know, the more that we actually, like, deal with what's there, acknowledge what's there, the more we heal, right? So, I'll tell you, you know, cleaning out the unconscious comes from doing work, like doing the 12 steps, doing spiritual work, doing spiritual practices to clean out the unconscious, right? So we want to become conscious of everything that we're doing, everything that we are, everything that's inside of us. This is the goal. To become conscious, to become, like, self-aware and stuff. Okay, so the way that we do that is we do spiritual work, meditation and qigong and, yoga, yoga, kundalini yoga. So, Carl Jung said once, he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and it will seem like fate. You will call it fate. So, there's guys that have a lot of, just for example, there's guys who have a lot of resentment and unconscious rage and anger against women. And they think a certain way about women. And, for example, you have two guys in a bar, right? I know, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. You have two guys in a bar. One guy has this unconscious resentment against women. The other does not. So, the guy that doesn't have the resentment against women is going to see, oh, there's a really attractive girl over there, right? I'm gonna go say hi. I'm gonna go shoot my shot. So the guy goes over there, says hi, and who knows? But he takes the action. who knows what she's going to do, how she's going to respond, but he gets up from the bar and goes to this young lady and says hi and asks for her number and all this stuff. But then you have over here, you have the guy who is angry, unconsciously angry towards women. And he, his thought process is women are whores, they just want you for your money, and this and that, they're gold diggers, this and that. So, whatever. So, instead of taking the positive action of going up to attractive girl, for example, and talking to her, he says he just sits there with his arms crossed, like, nah, I'm good. So the reason for going to the bar was to meet women. When he gets to the bar, he's like, no, I'm not doing this. I'll wait for them to come to me. Right? And so, and let's say the guy actually does. He goes up to the girl and he asks her out. Well, if the girl is smart, they'll have a conversation. And oftentimes what happens with unconscious behavior is it gets outed. Like, you're going to act upon the unconscious behavior without even consciously realizing it. So this guy might make a smug remark, he might tell her that, or he might, play hard to get, or, infer that she's been with a lot of guys, just things out of the blue to just ruin his chances with her, right? This happens all the time. So, it's just like, of course he wants to be in the relationship, but he's acting unconstructively. It's like acting against his own desires, basically. He's self-sabotaging himself. Right. So anyway, who becomes more successful? The guy who has worked on himself and cleared up all the unconscious resentment against people, all the negative feelings about relationships and this and that, or the guy who just is still sitting in it and steaming in it, and the next time he gets rejected, he has more fuel to add to the fire. So, this is why it's so important to clear out the unconscious. Because that guy with the unconscious resentment towards women is saying, man, I always get rejected. When he's creating the he's like perpetuating and creating that rejection, that the negative stuff. And so and I get this because I've done this. I have, acted a bit against my own interest in one way or another, like for, the longest times. Like, self-sabotage is a real thing. And it does get people in trouble, and it ruins relationships and friendships and all this stuff. So, ask me how I know. So, yeah, so this goes into healing. So, what a lot of people are not aware of is that when we have gunk built up in the unconscious, when you have all that gunk built up in the unconscious, right? What does it do? So, let's say you have suppressed emotions, let's say you have trauma that's not being dealt with or processed. You have over the entire human lifetime, you have things where if you're not introspective, if you're not like willing to work on yourself, these things will pile up over time. So disappointment, rejection, anger, hostility, sadness, different emotions, different traumas, the way that other people treat you, all of this stuff is becoming like this big ball of yarn, this big knot. And the more and more you go throughout life, this knot, if you don't do anything about it, if it's left untreated, this knot gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. This is why we have illness. So eventually that stuff is going to turn into rot. So you have, let's say you have a fresh wound, like you just got broken up with. That's a fresh wound. Now, let's say, like it's on your arm, right? Are you just going to cover it up and say, you know, that really hurts, but I'm not going to acknowledge the hurt, right? I'm fine, telling everybody I'm fine, telling everybody it's okay, I'm good, don't worry about it, I'm okay. Not processing the harm, the hurt, the trauma, things like that. You know how they say sunlight is the best disinfectant? The best disinfectant for hurt like that, like a breakup or whatever, is processing the trauma, processing the hurt, acknowledging the feelings, talking about it. Like, this is why 12-step groups exist, this is why therapy exists, to acknowledge that, talk about it, and release the energy behind it. So, you know, like a hurt, a trauma, basically, if you look at it like a pendulum, right? So the pendulum swings. So most of our lives were pretty much at equilibrium, right? There might be some swinging of this pendulum. Somebody might have, bumped into you, run into you, or, said something negative about you, which causes this pendulum to swing a little bit. When you. So you get, heartbroken, right? You get cheated on, you get, dumped or whatever. Okay, so that's a major pendulum swing. The pendulum is up here. And then, so it's going back and forth rapidly. There's major emotional instability in your life. You have all kinds of feelings come up, and it doesn't stop. You might try to stop it, but it doesn't stop. And so you have maybe multiple of these pendulums swinging. It's just like creating so much chaos and so much emotional pain in your life. But like what therapy does, what acknowledging these things does, is it gets you back to stable equilibrium. Right? So just think about that. Like there's multiple like uh examples that I could give and whatever, but when you make the unconscious conscious, that's when you get healed. And so you remember that big ball of yarn that I was talking about. As we age, that ball of yarn, that ball of hurts gets bigger. Just the more life experiences, the more, time and all that you've had. Um so, you know, if you deal with like a fresh cut, like, like we were talking about, if we say you had, with the breakup or the cheating on being cheated on and stuff. So let's say if you deal with that right away. So you know, put the antiseptic on, you clean it out, you real good, you clean the wound, you put, antiseptic, you put a bandage on there, make sure it's clean. That's good. That's basically self-care. So what that means in terms of emotional wounds is we process them, we talk about them, we let the emotions flow, we feel the feelings. A lot of people are so afraid of feeling their feelings. They think it's going to kill them. In fact, ask me how I know. I had a big problem with feeling my feelings for a long time there. Still do in a lot of ways, but I mean, we're all healing, and it's like I'm working on that particular defect of kind of trying to shut down my feelings and stuff. But yeah, I'm working on it. We're all working on it stuff. Um, so the more easily you're able to, just have your feelings, just cry it out, be angry, be pissed off, Okay, you gotta have and experience those feelings. Don't try to shut them down. And there's even exercises that you can do where breath work, like if you're about to cry and your diaphragm's going crazy, it's like it's hard to even speak. There's what I recently learned is called the breath of fire, and it's basically where you breathe in and out real quick, and it's basically allowing that diaphragm to just release this energy, this pent up energy that's in it, and just release. So there's things like that you can do. A lot of like a somatic work, things like this. This is all. There's different ways to process traumas that are different for everybody. Like nobody is going to respond the same way to one type or form of trauma healing than another. Like we're all different. We all need different things. And so, um, yeah. So then, yeah. So, um, what I wanted to say though is if you let that emotional wound, right, you let that wound fester, it means you push all of your feelings about that, you push all your feelings down. Oh no, I'm fine. Oh, I'm okay. Everything's fine. Whatever. Life goes on. If you do that, if you, you know, just Just neglect yourself. Neglect the wound. It's going to get infected. Right? And this is called illness. So, the emotional wounds, the emotional traumas, if we leave that alone long enough, it's going to manifest as physical illness. You know, diabetes, basically the inability to take in the sweetness of life, the positive things about life. Yeah, that's what diabetes is, the inability to take in the sweetness of life. There is, other things. I could go on about other things, other illnesses. But bottom line is these feelings, these suppressed feelings manifest as illnesses. I want you to, if you're interested in this topic further, please look up TMS, tension myositis syndrome. Because you know how, I don't know if anybody in this audience is old enough to remember this, and I don't even remember it. But there was a time back long ago where everybody was getting stomach ulcers. Like, they'd just be popping up everywhere. Stomach ulcers here and there. Well, eventually a doctor just, had realized that stomach ulcers are just, coming from increased stress in one's life. Or like, emotional problems, or, just stress and high emotions and things. And then after the stomach ulcers, it became lower back pain. People who are suffering with emotional insecurity will often have lower back pain, kidney issues, and things like that. Why? Kidneys are the water in the body. What is water? It's trust. So if you don't have enough money, you're not going to be trusting, which creates this issue. Now, about the stomach ulcers, the stomach is the earth element where things get processed, where things get digested. So if somebody has an inability to digest or process life, what process their feelings, process whatever's going on in their life, if they just have an inability to process this stuff, they'll get stomach ulcers, all kinds of problems with their digestive tract and stuff. So, it's stuff like that. So, what else? Yeah, just, so it's all over the place. So my personal opinion is that, what people think of as physical symptoms, the causation of those physical symptoms is an emotional imbalance. Trauma, something. You're not dealing with your feelings. You're not letting your feelings flow. And so those negative feelings get lodged into different parts of the body. This is what causes all illness, in my opinion. And so, when I do a distance energy healing session, I don't focus on healing the physical symptoms or the physical pain or whatever. When I do a distance energy healing session for my clients, I focus on their energetic state. I focus on the 5 elements within their body. I focus on the 3 ones, the 3 dantians. I focus upon what is happening energetically, what's happening emotionally, what's happening, like, do they have any, stuck trauma? And then I try to heal those blockages. So, and I've had great success. I've had clients come to me and say that they feel so much better after those healings, and that it's helped them so much. Their life has improved a lot. Now, here's the thing. I can only do so much as a healer. I love doing distance energy healing sessions with people, but I can only do so much. Now, granted, my healings stuff that I do is powerful. Don't get me wrong, it's powerful. But it's eventually, if you keep on living the same way that you did, you're going to have the same problems emerge. It's like, it's like you can get a lap band surgery, for eating too much, but if you continue to eat too much, then it's like, what's the point of that? You can get a corrective surgery, but if you go and do the same things that messed up that 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 caused the thing, then it's repeating the cycle. So I tell my clients, we can't keep doing the same thing. You've got to face the demons. You gotta face the demons in your unconscious that have taken hold of the unconscious. You have to fight them, and you have to win. Right? So, it's very important that we understand this. If you approach life as like a warrior, approaching it from a point of, I'm going to win, I have resistance or enemy, the enemy is the resistance, or whatever you want to call it, parasites or demons or whatever. Demons are, by the way, are not Beelzebub or whatever. They are suppressed feelings, anger, fear, rejection, or sadness, or despair, things like that. So, it's not what you think. Like, and those Maoshan monks weren't fighting, the Christian, the the demons within Christianity. They were fighting people's repressed emotions. The emotions formed entities, and the entities took a hold of people. Now, the only way that you can get possessed by a demon is if you allow them in. The way people allow them in is if you are in such a state of emotional pain, the demon will ask you, will offer, hey, I'll go ahead and distract you from your pain, so you don't have to worry about that pain anymore, and I'm just gonna feed off of all your negativity, all your negative feelings, all your negative emotions. So, the repressed trauma that people have, all of that repressed trauma, if beings are feeding off of that, like distracting you from the trauma, feeding off of the negativity, then, you're going to, it's like, man, it's such a bad combination. The bottom line is, folks, like, do your work on yourself. Please, go get a therapist, go get an energy healing, work the 12 steps. An easy one to work is Coda. Because all you need is a desire for healthy relationships. You don't have to be an alcoholic or anything like that. You just say you want better relationships and you can go do the 12 steps in Coda. And who doesn't want better relationships? So, alright, so, yeah. I know this is a long one, but, thank you for sticking in there with me. Hanging in there. Yeah. This is a topic that's dear to me because, of what I've been through, and, yeah, I'm here to help people and heal people. And so, if you want to work with me one-on-one, I do offer spiritual counseling. I offer distance energy healing, spiritual counseling, life coaching, things like that. So if you need a spiritual counselor, if you need to talk to somebody, like, you can talk to me at any time. So if you want that, you can go to GeboTheShaman.com or patreon.com/GeboTheShaman. Okay? Alright, all the stuff that I offer is down here. And I also offer the Qigong courses too. So those are another great way of helping you to expand and heal your energy body. And the more that you do those energy courses, or those Qigong courses, what the energy does is it starts moving through your body, and it starts bringing up emotions from the unconscious to be healed and to be processed. So, you can combine those things. The 12 steps with the Qigong. Okay? So, patreon.com/GeboTheShaman and GeboTheShaman.com. Those are the two places that you need to go. And if you have any questions, comments, or anything, you can leave them in the comments down below. I appreciate everyone who's been watching my channel. Thank you for your time and energy, and yeah, I appreciate you guys. And let me know what you want me to talk about next. Okay, so yeah, just let me know. Alright, guys. we will talk to you later. Peace. Take care, guys. Bye bye.